Welcome to the Kurt and Kenny podcast. Coming at you from Work in Progress co-working in downtown Las Vegas. We're here to talk about growing your business, making more money, and thriving in a startup life. Here they are, Kurt and Kenny.
Welcome to this episode of the Kurt and Kenny podcast. I'm Kenny.
I'm Kurt.
And today's episode is episode 6, NeONBRAND Origins, similar to the Wolverine story. No, not really. So we've told a lot of stories about NeONBRAND in these podcasts, and in this episode we decided to go a little bit deeper into NeONBRAND's history and Kurt and my history. We're going to talk about how I founded NeONBRAND, starting out with social media marketing before that was even a thing, and how Kurt ended up becoming our CEO, and some of the bumps and triumphs we've had along the way. So this is a fun story. We tell this story a lot to new clients. Kind of interested to see how we tell it to our podcast listeners right now. But
this is going to end up like it's a good thing we're recording this because
yeah, I'm going to send people to this because I'm tired of
7
telling
to 10
the story.
years from now, we're going to be older and our memories are going to be bad.
You're already older.
Two different stories. Yeah, that's true. Like my wife and I, we have different accounts of how the first kiss happened.
Oh.
You know,
We aren't going to tell the story of our first kiss, are we?
No,
Okay.
that'd be weird. We don't want it to get weird.
All right, cool. So I guess I'll start since this is the NeONBRAND story. NeONBRAND started, if you haven't heard, I went after college. I had this crazy idea that I was going to go to law school, and I decided to go. Went for a whole year, and we'll tell the law school story in another page. But after that year, I came back to Las Vegas. Just for reference, law school is 3 years long, so I did not graduate from law school. Came back, and I had a good friend that was running a social media marketing company at that time, and I had used him for a couple of the businesses my parents were running and some other businesses I was involved in before law school. He was doing good things for them. I was excited about the idea. I approached him and said, hey, why don't we join up? We did. That actually didn't work out at that point. The business that I joined wasn't what I thought it was, and then we ended up separating. Fast forward about another month. Came back together. We ended up starting a new company, new branding, everything. That was November of 2011. November of 2011, we formed NeONBRAND, digital marketing, and our main focus at that point was social media marketing. Now, I was still working my other job at that time, so I was basically doing all the work I could during the nighttime hours. So I'd come home, spend 3 or 4 hours with my wife, and then she would go to bed, and for about 6 or 7 hours after that, I would stay up and work on NeONBRAND stuff. It was a great life. I recommend it to everybody. After a little while, my partner at that time decided that we wanted to expand our services a little bit more and start offering websites. One of the reasons for that was a lot of our social media clients did not have a very good web presence, which meant when we were doing good things on social media, we couldn't send their traffic to their websites because their websites sucked. So the major shift happened when we landed a $50,000 website, and I quit my job, became full-time NeONBRAND, and been full-time ever since then. That was about April of 2012. Through that, we've gone through a bunch of iterations. That first partner hung out with me for about a year, and then he had a great opportunity with an app that him and a buddy started, and they took off and did that. Had some great success there. I had another partner who was my former SEO guy, great guy. We worked together for about a year as well until we had a difference in business strategies, and we ended up splitting as well. And then through all that, actually, so we ended up doing SEO. We ended up doing websites. A little bit more of the background. At the beginning, when we were building websites, I was outsourcing all of the work to freelancers, usually over Elance or Upwork or whatever it was called back then. So the websites were being built somewhere else. I was just managing the developers. And what I ended up seeing over time was a real lack in quality of a website. The end result looked good. The appearance, the skin looked good. But the underbelly, the code, the stuff that Google was reading wasn't up to the standards that I thought they should be. So I decided that I would start programming. So I picked up programming at that point, became a PHP developer, WordPress guy, but built a lot of PHP-centric apps, and started building them internally in-house here at NeONBRAND. And we've kept doing that ever since. We've gone through a lot of different developers over time, but we've always built our own websites from early on when we realized the quality wasn't what we needed it to be. Up until, what was it, Kurt, 2014 when we probably met?
late 14. No, it was well before
or
that.
13.
So if you rewind the clock back about 5 years, maybe 4 years earlier.
Before that.
Earlier, before NeONBRAND was founded. I had started my career in San Francisco with Fitch Ibka as a municipal and corporate bond analyst before a good friend of mine who'd been working in ophthalmology for years. She'd been working there, and I worked for her husband on my way through college. And, we'd had dinner over at their house a couple of times, and at one of those dinners, I must have been back, I don't know why we were having this dinner, but it was during this time with Fitch. She told me that I was wasting my potential. And I thought, so I went to school, I got a finance degree, and you're telling me that I'm wasting...
You mean finance, don't
finance.
lie.
So you're telling me I'm wasting my degree that I just spent 4 years getting, and I got a really good job with a really good firm. Oh, I remember how it happened. I had a job offer to go for Strong Capital Management, work for Strong Capital Management as a portfolio manager in Milwaukee. And so we were kind of in between and planning on moving, and my wife wasn't too thrilled with the idea that we'd be living in the frigid Midwest as opposed to being close to home and in the West. And it was just at this time she said, you're wasting all of your potential. I think you should meet a friend of mine who was an ophthalmologist in Las Vegas. As it turns out, I ended up running that ophthalmology practice for 5 years, and we had just tremendous growth, unprecedented growth at that time. And so one of the laser manufacturers that does LASIK surgery came knocking on my door and said, hey, we'd like you to join our business development group and consult with practices throughout the Intermountain West and to teach them to do what you're doing in your practice. And I did. After 5 really good years at the practice, it was an amicable separation, and I moved on. And 9 or 10 months into that gig, the economy went in the tank. Many of you remember 2007, 2008. So in 2007, in December, I accepted a new job, started in January of 2008, and was on the street kicking rocks in October of 2008. And at that time, some of those clients that I'd been working with Advanced Medical Optics said, look, we'll pay it. Come consult us. We want to have you continue to help us with our business. So I said, all right, that's cool. Hung out my shingle, and no one paid me for months. But I stuck with it and developed a really good consulting firm where we helped a lot of practices transition their growth. And my approach with them was always to fix the business first. We fix the business, we improve operations, we increase efficiencies, and invariably we would find out that produced a revenue problem for us, meaning we had excess capacity and more revenue to be gained, and we needed to fill it up. So through a mutual friend of mine, I met Kenny's most recent previous business partner from the previous story there. And he was doing some SEO work for my clients. Maybe he'd built a website or two, I can't remember. And so he was doing a little bit of work for me. I was starting to see how search engine optimization and website development was critical in acquiring leads for these businesses. And I worked with ophthalmologists and pediatricians and dentists and orthodontists and plastic surgeons and a number of different types of businesses. But I started to see how that could produce real lead volume and real credibility for the company. And after a few months of working with him, that's when Kenny and he joined together in business, and I started to get to know Kenny. And when they decided to split, I had a choice to make, and I chose to keep all of my clients and all of my business with Kenny. I was really impressed with the way that he was able to visualize the customer need for their customers. So how he could see what the client really needed to do in order to attract customers, how to build a website, and then most importantly, how to rank that website with SEO. And then that relationship stayed more or less true until late 2014.
So on my side, before we talk about that part, when we were meeting when I was still with my previous partner, there was a lot of value. I saw what you were doing. I saw what Kurt was doing for his customers, and time again, I said, Kurt, come and help us. Come consult NeONBRAND. Come tell us what we're doing so that we can fix our business and grow more. We were obviously littler at that time, much smaller, and we wanted to see bigger and better and awesomer and cooler things come through the door. So over the course of the year and a half that we worked together in that relationship, we probably had you come and consult us 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
So I was already seeing what Kurt can do. And then also during that time, I'm looking at Kurt's clients that come to us, and interesting things start happening when there's a business consultant inside of a business. So Kurt was not affiliated with us in any way monetarily. I mean, we were not benefiting from each other's clients per se. But what was happening is other than because we were both doing awesome things, we both got paid. But there was no like affiliate.
There wasn't an affiliate agreement. I wasn't getting
no,
paid.
You weren't paying me, and I wasn't paying you.
Paid a portion of your
the
stuff.
Clients
you
were paying both of
portion
us.
Of mine.
Exactly. But what happened was clients that didn't have somebody like Kurt or Kurt inside the business, we would do a lot of good SEO work for it. They would rank and they would get leads. The leads would hit the front door, and the business would not account for them correctly, or would not know what to do with them, would not know how to close a deal essentially, and would lose that revenue or would mistrack that revenue and wouldn't attribute that to the work that we were doing. So to them, and I don't blame them necessarily because their reporting was failing them more so than anything, they would look at me and say, it's not working, which was false. But they didn't have any way of proving it, and I didn't have any way of proving it because I wasn't inside their business. I couldn't actually tell them, no, here's where your leads are coming from. But when Kurt or somebody like Kurt was involved in the equation, the leads got tracked correctly that came through the front door. They knew that it was SEO. They knew that it was social media. They knew that the new website was working. And so in their minds, what we were doing was working much better. Ergo, they paid us for much longer, became better clients, were more satisfied.
And to this day, 5 years later,
we still have some of those
still have some of those clients.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
and what's really interesting about this is, I come from a much more traditional background. With all of these clients, especially in the refractive surgery, ophthalmology world, I was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions a year, with these clients on radio and print and TV and these other mediums, and I was always frustrated. In fact, I'm still frustrated to this day that technology has not caught up in those industries. I was frustrated with the fact that there was no evidentiary link between when an ad went out and when a lead was generated. Now, retrospectively, I could look at trend lines and I could look at volume for the practices that would implement smart tracking.
Right.
And even going back further, back when I was running the medical practice, and this is another key element that brought Kenny and I together, I had developed this huge labyrinth of spreadsheets that my salespeople absolutely hated. First of all, salespeople hate being held accountable. and second of all, it was a lot of work, truly. But I had built this huge labyrinth of spreadsheets that told me everything that ever happened from a time of phone call. This is back before web submissions, but from a phone call. I know. It feels. I
think I find a way to say that in every single podcast.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's because you're still wet behind the ears.
Yeah, that's
why. But we tracked everything. We knew why they called us, how they called us, where they called us from, and what their lead sources were. And so I developed this labyrinth of stuff. And when I had left the ophthalmology practice, I took my spreadsheets to a developer, and I said, look, would you be willing to be an equity partner and develop this into a software that salespeople won't kick against constantly? Because the information is ridiculously valuable, and maybe we'll get into a case on that, but the information is ridiculously valuable, and it's what really helped me guide that practice to
success,
ridiculous levels of growth, and others afterward. So I'd been working on that sort of outside of my relationship with Kenny and the clients, and I'd implemented it with a couple of clients. So that operational detail was taking place and creating better client results and better service relationships for both of us.
So after my second partner ended up leaving and Kurt ended up staying with me, we continued on the marketing for our
independently.
Yeah, independently.
I was doing my thing, Kenny was doing his thing.
And we continued working together on some of the clients that we had in common. And that went on probably for 6 months to a year before you finally...
Maybe longer.
Yeah,
it was probably longer. It would have been close to... I mean, the entire duration of us knowing each other was probably a year and a half old by that point, and then it continued on for another 9 months or so afterward.
Yeah.
Until I came to you and said, hey, the situation I have with my software program is really not what I want it to be. Do you build software? This is from my point of view. I don't know if we've ever discussed this, but from my point of view, this was a huge influence in my approach to say I'd like NeONBRAND to be a part of my business world.
Yeah.
But I brought the software I did to Kenny and laid it out, and I'll never forget
we're still not partners at this point. This is
right. I'll never forget. It's funny that we're back here at Work in Progress because I remember in the meeting room 4 that we had every inch of the glass board written on, And we ran out of
8.5 by
space,
11
so
papers.
we resorted to 8.5 by 11 papers strewn across the floor and on the wall, talking about the different ways that this software would work and interact. And I said, can you do this? And Kenny said, yeah, we can do it. I don't think he really knew what he was getting into at the time, but he said,
Freaking Kurt.
yeah, right. He said, yeah, we can do it. And as that software started to evolve, it started to open my eyes to, and because of our continued interaction on social media and SEO, it really started to open to my eyes to the fact that you can market your business and you can track where leads are coming from, to the point where I see the software can then make you an intelligent business person and improve your campaign decisions with your marketing. Mm-hmm. So I started to see all of this stuff come together, and I think on the other hand, you need to tell your side of the story, but I think on the other hand, Kenny was saying, you know, my clients last longer and are happier when their businesses operate better, and then how to get and close deals, and all this stuff sort of there was a confluence of all of this stuff, and I remember. Okay, you can.
Well, so we built the site, and it turned out it's awesome. It's not where we all want it to be, and there's a lot more.
Which
that
it probably
needs to
never
be
will
done.
be, because we always want more the more we build.
But through that process, actually, just as recent as last weekend when we were down in San Diego, I was talking to my friend's little brother, who's not very little. He's like 25. And he was telling me about how he's living with some roommates, and they're all super excited about, and they're like his best friends, and they're all super excited about starting a business together. And it kind of gave me an epiphany about Kurt and I's relationship. My first two, since Kurt is my third partner in NeONBRAND, my first two partners were my friends. And what's interesting about those two partners, while we're actually still good friends, I consider them both my friends to this day, we were better friends than we were business partners. We weren't necessarily, it's just a totally different world. When you're friends with somebody first, your expectations and your knowledge of the person, you don't know how they're going to act when it comes down to business, which people are totally different when it comes down to business.
Well, your emotions interact differently.
Yeah.
We're no less emotional than if we'd known each other for 30 years.
Exactly.
But your emotions interact differently.
Right.
When you don't start friends.
Right. So, Kurt and I, not that we weren't quote-unquote friends, but we were work friends for 2.5 years. And we hung out and we did all these things. We shared clients. We built a website together. We quote-unquote dated for a long time before.
And in each scenario, there were clear, deliverable expectations.
Yeah.
So there was that uniqueness to even though we had a great relationship, it was easy to get along with each other.
Right.
We both knew that we had to measure up to one another's work product, or else either or both of us would suffer.
Exactly. So over the course of building that app, I think that was kind of the deal clincher to where, at least from Kurt's angle, I mean, I was thinking it too, but Kurt's the one that finally said, hey, we need to talk. I think we need to join up a little bit here. Make this a little more formal.
So for me, what was going on in my mind was I still have the hub and spoke diagram. I actually found it about 4 months ago, and I showed it to Kenny.
Yeah.
I was sitting at my desk one day at an office separate from Kenny, and I wrote which was Envision Management and Marketing. I wrote Envision in the middle, and I started to think about what are all the things that we do really well, and then what pieces are missing. And so I drew a hub and spoke diagram, and I drew pieces. I drew, the spokes to the things that we really did well with Envision. And then on the other side, I left out the pieces that made our wheel flat. Mm-hmm. And that was the marketing side of things. And I was looking at what the combination of our services was bringing. And in truth, I always felt like Kenny had a hard time really assigning the right value to the work he was doing.
I am not a sales guy, so I'm the guy that wants to hook up all my buddies. And so Kurt, he still wants to hook up his buddies, he's much more better at saying, this is a $10,000 thing. Like, that's what the value is. Like, I'm not going to discount it for you because that's what the value is. You got to pay what it's worth. And so that was kind of holding back our NeONBRAND growth early on, was I was greatly undervaluing, which ended up in less than satisfied customers lots of times because they had expectations that were grandiose, and I couldn't afford to get to those levels because I was discounting the builds. Anyways, it was a rough patch.
And my
Kurt's strong point was that he was able to handle that much better than I was.
My philosophy has always been premium quality, premium price.
Yeah.
And to this day, I don't consider myself a genius. I do love reading from really successful people like Jack Welch and John Huntsman and some of these guys, Phil Knight. High quality, high value, equals premium price. And every business that I've ever been able to influence or own, when we followed that philosophy, we have more satisfied clients, we have better results for everybody, and we're able to grow a work environment, a team that people love to be around. And I think that's still true of NeONBRAND today. But to get back to where we were in the story, so I came to Kenny and I said, look, Kenny, I want to own NeONBRAND. And Kenny's like, oh, I hate running businesses. Kenny's first words to me were, oh, I hate running my business. I love doing my business, but I hate running my business. And I said, well, I love running businesses, and I don't have a clue about 90% of what you do. So let's talk about it. And as we went down the road, we found that the right path for us was to be equally yoked in our particular strengths. And it wasn't the right fit for me to buy NeONBRAND, but rather it was the right thing to join all of the things that we do well and to combine them. And I've told people hundreds of times over the last few years, we made it official. The dating stopped and the marriage occurred in September
Contract
of 2015.
signed.
It was official then. But I've told people hundreds of times since, the thing that makes our partnership work is I consider us both pretty bright guys. Kenny's actually one of the most adaptable humans I've ever met. He's super quick to learn stuff, and I've liked that in my more traditional sense of business that he's always exploring new frontiers that I don't see, and I'm able to evaluate them. But I guess what I'm
and then Kurt sells all my cool ideas. It works out great.
Yeah, it works out good. I like to make deals. I love to make deals, and I love to meet with people, and that adds a lot of vitality to my life. But I've told people hundreds of times since, the thing that makes our partnership great is I know enough about what you do to not get in your way, and you know enough about what I do to not get in my way. And we're able to focus on those things that make us great at what we do, and 1 + 1 is more than 2 for us in that regard.
There's a lot of overlap in our knowledge. I mean, we do. It's funny how many times when we started this, the whole reason we started this podcast was because it's funny how many times we'll be in this room arguing about a point, the good kind of arguing a point where we're both pretty much right, and at the end of the conversation, we come to a logical conclusion. I mean, we get into it. You know, we're both strong-headed, proud dudes who are right all the time, especially Kurt, right, Kurt?
But people don't understand. I tell this to my kids all the time, you know, and my kids listen to our podcast, so they're going to roll their eyes at this, especially my 14 and 12-year-old daughters. But people don't understand the burden of being right all the time. You know, they don't know the expectations that are placed on someone who is right all the time.
Yeah, totally.
You know, maybe someday people will understand. Maybe when I write my memoirs. But.
So anywho, that was the whole genesis of this podcast, was because we have so many good conversations about ideas and ways to market things, and both of us come from it at different angles with usually equally valid results. It makes for good discussion. So,
in fact, Kitty, our writer, our fuchsia, I think it's fuchsia-haired writer this week.
Well, this week, yeah, right.
Has tried to get us to
and producer. She pretty much is the one that's helping us run this whole thing. So
props
good job,
to you, Kitty. Thanks. But she's been telling us for months now that we need to have a reality TV show. The problem is,
Kurt hates
I wither on camera. I mean, I hate being on camera, even for a still photo. But I have a face for radio, I suppose. But so anyway, you know, the connection to this story is, I think what you really get at NeONBRAND is you get the best of a very traditional academic structured training in business from a really entrepreneurial minded person. First guy I ever worked for, Kevin Bogue, love the guy to this day. He's one of my idols and mentors. He put me to work in a sporting goods store and a motorcycle shop, and I can't think of anything more fun for a teenager to do than that. But, you know, he showed me what gritty, scrappy entrepreneurship looks like. Yeah. And I always wanted to be, from the time I worked with him. Maybe it goes back to when I was 8 years old with the lawn mowing business, but I watched him struggle through business, which is why I wanted to pursue a business education. But being able to apply that on an entrepreneurial level and own my own businesses and sort of craft my own future, but doing it in ways that helps other people, that's been a really fun that's been a really fun path to get to where we are. And the future, I think, is even more interesting than the past.
And another unique point about us, it's kind of funny, when we get in with a client, and this just happened not too long ago, we had a client come in both of us were meeting with him. It was just Kurt and I and the client. And the client started telling us about this cool new vacation idea that he had. And the difference between a Neon Brand meeting and potentially other marketing or SEO guy meetings was, for the next 45 minutes after he told us this idea, Kurt and I were enthralled. We were so deep into discussion about how cool of an idea and all the options this business has. I mean, we really were asking so many questions. We wanted to know how this business was going to survive. We didn't even talk about the marketing, really, because once we spent that 30 to 45 minutes figuring out how the business worked, that allowed us to pull back and say, okay, here's how we're going to market this thing. We now knew the ins and outs of this business so well that we weren't going to recommend maybe a social media approach, because we knew that wasn't going to help increase the bottom line. We were just going to go with an SEO. I can't remember the specifics of this meeting. It was a little bit ago, but that's the idea. We come back in with these guys at a business level, and we get excited about the business, and we get excited about them making more money, and then we're allowed to come back and take our tools, which is the marketing power, and say, here's how we're going to do that. Here's how we're going to make you more money, which has just been proven to be more valuable time and time and time again.
Which I think is so. You know, if you were to sum up what makes Neon Brand what it is today, I think you get a real aggressive, innovative spirit with a really, really determined entrepreneurial focus, and we have really high quality education and experience in the things that matter to grow a business. One of my passions and one of my loves still to this day is business consulting.
Yeah.
Because I can't get enough of businesses. I can't get enough of how they operate, how their proprietors came to be in business,
how to optimize and make them better.
I can't get enough of it. And you know, Kenny is a business problem solver that thinks technology first, which, if you pull it all back to that moment where it all came together with IC, I had an old world business problem that needed a new world technology solution. And so all of the intellectual property and the experience and the struggling that went into trying to get a software program to make my organizations more efficient was solved with a technological mindset that could see things that I can't see. Yep. And things that I don't see. And so it's amazing. It's a great story. I know there's a lot of the story yet to be written, but you know, hopefully for those of you who wonder who's guiding the ship that's steering your marketing, or wondering if there's an organization that's right for you, the Neon Brand package, what makes Neon Brand special, I think, is that we have all of the right training, experience, and ambition in all the right places to be a great partner for operating a business. And we are vehement, and we are passionate, and we are determined in a way that, even though we're at odds sometimes with ideas, we're never at odds with what the objective is. And that is, how do we take our clients' trust and investment in us and make them money to improve their lives and their families and their employees and their business.
And that'll do it for episode 6, Neon Brand Origins. We'll see you on the flip side.
Later.
Okay, so the outro just played. I think we should tell some stories, just silly stories. If not these stories, do you have any stories that you can think of?
Yeah.
Mostly employee related. Kurt, if you have some stories too, but I can just think of some funny employee stories over time that need to be memorialized in a podcast. Why not? So one time we had this employee. We've had about 57 employees with Neon Brand since the beginning, which is kind of crazy. I just looked up the number, 57 or 8, something like that. And some of them have been freaking awesome, and they've had some good stories. We had one guy early on. Back in our first office, there were only like 4 of us, but we each had about a 500 square foot office to ourselves, if not bigger. They were huge for one guy. Definitely more than we needed. But this one guy, he was in his room doing his thing. He had his big desk in there with the cabinets and everything. I mean, he was set up. And he was with us for about 6 months, and then he ended up not working for us anymore. And so we went in to clean out his office. I don't know, have you heard this story? Maybe you've not heard this story. So we went in to clean out his office. Me and Wesley, one of our first employees too, went in to clean out his office after he's gone, and we start, getting all the paperwork and stuff and kind of scooping that into the garbage. And we open up the cabinets above his desk. And when we opened up the cabinets above his desk, I kid you not, there were probably 40 to 50 2-liter bottles or canned sodas or just the little liter bottles of soda, all of them were exactly half drink. They were all half full. So we had a major OCD thing going on there where
or were they half empty?
Or half empty. Oh, I don't know. I'm a more half full kind of guy, so they were half full. But they were all half full. There were like 40 of them. Wesley and I were looked at each other like, oh my gosh, what is going on right now? So that was one of our early employees. Can you think of more any stories, or do you want? I got some story. I got more.
Yeah, my favorite story related to employees was we had this guy come in for an interview. This was early on after I'd become a partner at NeONBRAND. He comes in sharp looking dude, super sharp, said all the right things, did all the right things. And my protocol is I interview at least 3 times, sometimes 4. And I usually make the applicant pass a test of some kind, either a work product or an intellect test or something like that. All the things. So we hire him, put him to work. And at this time, we were all in one big room. And I'll never forget, we're in the middle of our staff meeting. We used to have these stand-up meetings where we discuss each client, okay?
I remember this story.
And so my desk was positioned opposite in the room, but up against a big glass wall. So most of what was going on a computer screen could be reflected, right? So I'm in the middle of directing this meeting, and I had to learn this, by the way. Kenny does this, and I still, when I'm in a meeting with clients, I just ignore my stuff. I ignore my tech. Kenny texts the entire time. Like, he communicates what's going on.
I talk to people.
No, I'm not saying you don't talk to them, but you're much more adept at using technology and stuff, at that stuff. And I'll never forget, we're in the middle of this really important meeting with the staff, and Kenny texts me in the middle of a sentence. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm talking, right? I look at the text, and Kenny goes, check out your new employee. And Kenny had spotted from across the room that during this important client meeting, our employee,
through the reflection on the glass, I could see the reflection on the glass reflecting his phone,
is checking out his Facebook feed.
Like, what are you doing, dude?
That's not even the funny part of the story. The funny part of the story is that explained why every time he went to the restroom, it took 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That was my favorite Neon so far. My favorite non-Neon is when I had a bad employee fire themselves, but we'll save that one for another day. That's a non-Neon.
We had an employee quit the day we were going to fire him. That was convenient.
Yeah, that worked out good.
There was another one where we had this guy, loved this kid. So I'm sitting in my office, and this is all I know because this is all I saw. But I put together the pieces quickly. I'm sitting in my office. This is back in the early beginning of the office days where we had our huge offices that were way too big. And all of a sudden, in my door walks our employee, who I loved. He was a great kid. He's standing there in his boxer briefs. He was standing there in his boxer briefs and had his pants under his arm, and he's pale as a ghost. And all he says was, "I'm going home." And he turned around and left. Like, oh my gosh. So come to find out, he made a little poo-poo in his pants.
Which the part of that story that he sharted. But the thing about that story that gets me the most is why was he in his boxer briefs?
I can't put it together. I don't know the details. Oh man, we had another employee who, after she did not work for us anymore, I think we had to let her go. She emailed me one of the most creative phrases I've ever heard of, and she said that we were a hashtagging gang of intellectual slugs. Like, wow, that's like pretty poetic. And so we've stuck with that for a long time. It was if you couldn't tell, that wasn't a very mutual separation. One last story. So we had a guy that was working for us. He was a cool guy. He was a programmer. He built some good websites for us, and he got an opportunity to go work down in California on this big app. We were in the middle of a couple projects, so the plan was he was going to move, but he was going to keep working part-time from LA to finish out these last few apps. The day he moves, we actually went to his house. We were like, "See you later, man. You're awesome. We'll talk to you next week after you get settled in." Cool. That day was the last day we ever heard from said employee. He disappeared. Had no idea where he went. Fast forward, and literally I had to figure out how to finish his websites. I mean, nothing. Fast forward to 364 days later, I get a text message from that guy, and he says, "Hey, can I come see you guys?" It's like, WTF, where have you been? Come to find out, he had a past life with some trouble with the law. And what he didn't tell us is that before he was moving to California, he had a parole hearing, I think, for this thing, which was supposedly already set up between the attorneys, that he was just going to be on parole and that he was going to move down to LA and be on parole. It was all set up. But when they got to court, the judge said, nope, you're going to jail right now. And he spent the next 364 days in a California prison and we couldn't contact him. So he went from, just poof, off the map until 364 days later. Kind of crazy. And then we got our sales guy who could not get SEO right. He kept calling it CEO, and I wanted to strangle him. Like, it's not CEO, dude. And this went on for months. I don't know why he's hung around as long as he did. Anywho, any other stories you can think of?
It's because
I couldn't fire people. I like my people too much.
Yeah. Kenny's like his dad. Kenny holds on too close to
Dad.
people.
All right, you got any other stories?
No.
All right.
Let's let him go.
See you next time.
Bye.